Spider-Man Brand New Day has arrived, and well, when I say a roller coaster, I really mean it, you guys. The film was something else, but does it hold up? Is it good? Did it succeed, or does it fumble as just another modern MCU movie? Well,
that came out of you. Yeah, you can't do that, huh?
to start with, this film ultimately had some pretty big shoes to fill. Coming off the back of No Way Home, one of my personal favourite MCU films and Spider-Man films to date. Peter Parker is now all alone and has basically gone full-time Spider-Man, heavily neglecting his personal life, which, as you can imagine, causes a heavy emotional toll on himself, which in turn causes a mutation to occur where his powers are supercharged, and he gains organic webs just like Tobey Maguire's Peter. And if that wasn't a lot to deal with, and spoiler warning ahead because it's absolutely pointless trying to review this movie without talking spoilers, as so much is wrapped up in mystery really, so you have been warned. On top of dealing with all of that, he now has to stop Jean Grey, who's become a bit of a menace, mind controlling everyone and anyone she sees fit on her mission to free her sister from the supposed good guys at Damage Control. That's basically the gist of it. I don't want to do a play-by-play on this. I just want to talk about the highs and the lows and really get into this film if it succeeded in making Tom Holland's Spider-Man truly feel like Spider-Man. To start with properly, I love how sad Peter is in this movie. We have countless scenes constantly showing this point, and Tom Holland absolutely smashes the emotional beats here. A personal favourite and peak of Peter's sadness would be after seeing MJ kiss another dude for the first time, causing Peter to run out and swing around in the rain wearing his civilian clothes. Shit like this is awesome, and I absolutely love seeing Peter Parker using Spider-Man's powers. That's always been so cool to me and was such a highlight in the Raimi film Spider-Man 3. A great film, by the way. I don't want to hear any negative talk about that. Okay, maybe I had a few problems, but it's still a great film. Needless to say, there are a lot of scenes here where Peter gets his heart utterly shattered into pieces, and I love every single one. I'm a true Spider-Man fan and I love depressed Peter Parker, so this made me very happy. John Bernthal as the Punisher is also a highlight here. While sometimes coming across as a little over the top, I think him and Holland have such great banter and chemistry that it really doesn't bother me. And by the end, the guy just has me smiling. Looking back, I absolutely loved his scenes, and you would feel a heavy hole if he wasn't here after watching how it all plays out. I'm very happy he was included. He did fantastic, and he's come such a long way since the days of The Walking Dead, where he was also fantastic. Side note, Shane Welsh in The Walking Dead was my favourite character. I idolised him, even though he was sadistic. He was such a fun character to watch, and I loved every scene with him in, much like this movie. Sorry about that, back to the main quest. The scene where Spider-Man tries to compare their loneliness and the Punisher hits him with his life isn't a choice gave me goosebumps and really showed me why he needed to be a part of this story. We also have Ned and MJ back for the journey, and I really did not want them back here. I didn't want them to return so soon after the ending of No Way Home had such a powerful message and was so beautiful. I didn't want them to undo all the groundwork laid out by that one. But happy to say neither of them did ruin anything, and it was an absolute blast to have them back alongside Peter. MJ and Peter don't get back together by the end, which was the smartest choice. Even having MJ delivering a heartbreaking line about how she doesn't love Peter because she doesn't know him, just to drive the point home. And that's an extremely powerful line in this film. You can hear fans sobbing while watching it. It hit people in the audience just as it was supposed to, and it must have been an absolute gut punch for Peter. But even though I said I didn't want these two back and to undo the ending, I am a hypocrite, because seeing Ned remember who Peter is at the very end of the film just gave me such a warm feeling. This film had me rooting for their friendship to win. And for people worried about the Hulk being all over this film taking away from Spider-Man, don't worry, he plays an extremely good but supporting role. He's not in this movie long at all, and we've pretty much seen all his scenes in the trailers, but they're still great with a little bit more fluff to make them a little bit longer, as long as you stay away from some of the TV spots. But I just loved Bruce in this film. Bruce Banner scenes, to be fair, the guy did a good job here. Not the biggest fan of him as Bruce Banner, but in this movie he was pretty great, and I loved seeing Bruce struggle with the Hulk again. It was just so refreshing to witness after all these years. It was an absolute peak Hulk moment in the MCU, accompanied by some amazing CGI. It had me hysterical when the Punisher tried to take him down as well. Obviously extremely outmatched. Even if that scene again was a little bit short, it worked so well for me. Speaking about short scenes, the montage at the beginning of the movie with all the villains, while cool, really wasted characters like Tombstone in my opinion. Even though it was a fun montage, I feel when you bring a character like Tombstone to the big screen for a mainline Spider-Man film, he needs to have a more important role because he's such a cool character. He's a personal favourite of mine from the 90s show and Spectacular Spider-Man. Bit disappointed he was underutilised here. Hopefully he makes a return in the future. The highlight out of the montage was definitely the Scorpion, and he is the only one to return later in the movie, but he really isn't here for long. Saying that, he's still an absolute scene stealer for me in the action. Not so much the actor's performance, which wasn't bad, it was good, but wasn't that noteworthy to me. But the way Scorpion fights was just so good. It was awesome comic book fun, and it took me back to the Raimi films in certain moments. But that's another thing this film excels at, is the atmosphere and the tone. While yes, similar to previous Spider-Man films, I believe it builds upon them, and it's an absolute breath of fresh air for the MCU. It's just what this franchise needed after all this time, really making the Spider-Man films feel alive again. The action scenes and web swinging scenes were breathtaking, and even though I had my doubts about the director, the guy showed up to work, and I take my doubts back. I even liked the cop Spider-Man befriends and think she played very well and brought a good energy to the performance. The whole of New York really felt alive, more than it has done since the Raimi films all those years ago. And I don't mean to keep bringing up the Raimi films. I'm not saying this film copied it, but it's very heavily inspired by those films, and that's not a bad thing. Those films were peak Spider-Man, and I don't think you will ever top them, so why not trying to build upon them and take inspiration from them? It works. However, there is a part of this movie which you are either going to love or hate, and that's the worst kept secret of the entire thing. Of course, that being Jean Grey's appearance. I was so skeptical of her going in because it's an absurd choice for a Spider-Man villain because she's an X-Men character, but I'm telling you now, it worked. I loved all of her scenes and powers that she used here. She was fantastic and felt so fresh to see in a Spider-Man film, if not a little MCU-ified. But before we get into that, one of the best scenes in this film I would just like to mention is when Jean Grey takes control of MJ. And for people who have seen this movie, you know where I'm going with this. She pretends to be in love with Peter again after he tries to rescue her. The scene was just so intense and so heartbreaking to witness. You could feel the anger and sorrow in Tom Holland's performance. MJ here kisses Peter and confesses being in love with him and remembering just to spit it back in his face and to mock him, triggering another rage scene where he grabs her by the throat and hangs her over the balcony, where Jean Grey forces MJ to launch off. And for a split second, I honestly thought MJ might die, because we have seen this before in other films, particularly The Amazing Spider-Man 2. We know Gwen Stacy's death is infamous. It is famous, and most people know this scene. So there was a bit of doubt in my mind. Maybe not that she was going to die, but more so that she was going to be seriously injured. Luckily she wasn't, and he did save her in the end. But it just goes to the credit of Tom Holland and Zendaya, to be fair. Their acting here was so good and so intense. But yeah, while I did love this movie, there is a fair bit that weighs it down ever so slightly. For one, this is the most MCU Spider-Man film has felt like a true Spider-Man film. But the MCU does still feel apparent, with people like Yelena appearing for a small cameo, talking about potatoes. And while I understand the joke about Peter being small potatoes, the kid's been to space and he has done more than Yelena, so I really don't understand the mentality from her as a character, as a person. It's more of a mouthpiece for the MCU. But saying that, she was still fun, and I did like her scenes. I know a lot of people think they break the pace of the movie, but I quite like them. I think she was a fun addition. It felt very comic booky, is what I'm trying to say. It felt very comic book accurate, or like you'd see in the 90s cartoon, where cameos just sort of appeared randomly without any build-up. So I guess I'm just used to that kind of stuff now. But she definitely did not need to be here, that's for sure. As for the hand, the ninjas I believe are from the Daredevil TV series. I'll be honest, I haven't watched it and I know nothing about the hand. and I couldn't care less about them being here. I feel you could have replaced them in the end fight probably with Scorpion again, or another iconic Spider-Man character, and that would have been much better. Maybe build up to the Rhino being the muscle at the end, sort of how the Juggernaut was used in Deadpool 2. And that would have been much better, but it was cool to see Peter use his improved powers to defeat them, albeit with the web cocoon. We've already seen that scene in the trailer. Oh yes, speaking of powers, in this film Peter develops a sort of mutation and his powers become super heightened. His strength is times 10, his spidey senses are off the charts, but they do stop working for a while. He produces natural webbing, like I previously mentioned, a lot like Tobey Maguire's. And the powers are a good narrative thread, really. They tie him to the Hulk and to Jean Grey. They tie them all together nicely, but they do sort of stop being relevant when the script says to. And I think overall that plot doesn't really go anywhere. It is complementary to Peter's growth, the theme of growth, the theme of change. So the powers do come with a few meanings, but maybe not in the strongest way they could have done. The idea, I guess. I feel like they wanted to do it, but they didn't want to go all the way with it. And it definitely would have felt a little similar if they ever do the Black Suit Venom story arc. So I do understand it. I think it works well enough, but you will pick up on it if you pay attention to narrative threads in movies. I did hear as well they originally wanted Man-Spider to have a nightmare sequence in this film, and I'll never forgive them for not going with that genius idea. Apparently it would have been too scary for kids, but like I say, fuck it, do it. You know, we grew up with Goosebumps, we grew up with very traumatic scenes in kids' cartoons. Courage the Cowardly Dog comes to mind. Sam Raimi would have done it, or them horror jump scares. I'm just saying, kids can handle more than you think, and we shouldn't pussyfoot around them, to be honest. A bit disappointed as well, we never got the extra limbs, extra arms, but you know, this film was pretty stuffed, and I understand you have to cater to a wider audience with the MCU. I understand that, and kids are a big part of Spider-Man, so is it the right call? I don't think so, but I do respect to an extent why they chose to go this way. But also, if I'm being honest, even though Peter was for sure miserable here, I feel there were a few moments they could have gone further. Let me explain. I feel like we don't see enough of Peter just alone in his room, like his actual apartment, not the loft where he's put all his tech, which again I liked because it was clearly junk that he'd made into good tech, but it does take away a little bit of that ending from No Way Home where he had absolutely nothing, but there was a time jump, so again it makes sense. It's just me being a bit greedy there. But to mention Tobey Maguire as well, once more, we got loads of scenes of him just sitting alone in his room and just lingering on the sadness and loneliness. Again, it's definitely me being a bit greedy, but I would have loved a scene of Spider-Man fighting a criminal, coming home and all excited. You know, he's just took down a big criminal. Maybe there was people cheering for him. He's really excited and ecstatic, and then he swings home and he just looks around his empty apartment with nobody to tell. I think that if you lingered on it, it would have been heartbreaking. But again, it's definitely me being greedy because there is a lot of beautiful, sad scenes that do marinate without an MCU joke undercutting them. I want to make that very clear. I also suppose the runtime is just a little too long. As I said, it does start to feel a bit bloated by the end, a bit too much. This is a very emotional film, so the dopamine levels are high and the emotional stress you feel for the characters is also high, so you do feel a little burnt out by the end. Not a bad thing, but it is a little bit too long. Speaking of the end, us fans know where this is about to go, because if you stayed right until the end for the famous mid and end credit scenes, oh dear, what a disaster. This will go down, I'm sure, as an infamous fail in the MCU. There was no mid-credit scene, and the end credit scene was slightly pathetic, to be honest. I don't know why they didn't use that time to show off Doctor Doom a little more and build some more hype for Avengers Doomsday, which I wouldn't usually want, because yes, I just complained it was a little bit too MCU at times, but this time it was needed. And if you had nothing else really, you might as well build some hype for the big collaborative movie in your universe, or tease something else Spider-Man related, not the key dangling nothingness they gave us that they can really just change to mean whatever they want. Maybe it means Tobey Maguire in space, maybe it means Tom Holland in space, in Secret Wars maybe means the symbiote. They can really just change it to mean whatever they want, and I think it was a little unfair on the audience. A little bit lazy, really. All in all though, this was an excellent film. A lot of fun with a lot of emotion that feels like a true roller coaster by the end. Not wrapping everything up so that the story can continue nicely in the sequel. An absolute blast of a movie and a true success in my opinion. Yes, Spider-Man Brand New Day was a true success, and I think it's a solid 4 out of 5. I look forward to Doomsday with skepticism, but Marvel is proving with the likes of Deadpool and Wolverine, Spider-Man Brand New Day, they still have it. They still have some source, and I hope they bring that to Doomsday and Secret Wars. And of course, I'm looking even more forward to the next Spider-Man film. Until then, please like and subscribe, take care, and be safe out there.